Hey, good afternoon, everyone, on this sunny afternoon here from Brussels. Not too warm yet. It's going to be much hotter by the end of the week. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Roger, our guest speaker for today.
Thank you. Nice for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for taking the time and opportunity to come here from the Netherlands.
Sure.
To talk to us here on campus. We're in the studio in Brussels. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and a special welcome to our center members who are viewing this presentation on campus down the hall in one of our classrooms. And afterwards, Roger will continue the topic in a more closed setting with our members and a more hands-on presentation on the topic of today. After this seminar, I explained, sorry about that. This is the Vlerick Center for Enterprise Architecture and Digital Design. So we're a community of enterprise architects, digital designers, digital transformation specialists. We share our knowledge, experiences with our members, member companies, in workshops, in network events. We have drinks afterwards, of course, and we're kind of a closed community. So if you would like to know more about the center, maybe you would like to join, you would like to know what's going on behind the scenes, like later on with Roger here on campus, have a look at Vlerick.com, our website. Use the little search bar, look for Center for EA or Enterprise Architecture, and you will find it. I couldn't share a direct link. It's a bit difficult, but you can also go to LinkedIn. Of course, probably most of you found us out about this webinar via LinkedIn, which is our main channel of communication next to what is published via Vlerick.com. But have a look at there, have a look at our next presentations after the summer. And do get in touch, look up the contact details on the website or contact us directly via LinkedIn. It doesn't matter. So if you want to be maybe part as a member of our community, or if you're a business consultancy or IT solutions provider and would like to share a compelling customer case with us, do get in touch. A big thanks also to our partner Fujitsu, who is supporting the center and is a sponsor of one of the research tracks here at the school. Next slide, please. So, Roger, again, good afternoon. I'm rushing a bit. It's the start of the seminar, so to get up to speed. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
Well, it's not too hot yet, but I'm feeling quite. It's getting a bit warmer now, but it's. I'm running a bit in front of what I would like to say. It's not your first time in Brussels, right? It's you have worked here down the roads, if I understand correctly.
Yes, there are two big towers down the road.
Yeah.
Where I've worked for 2 years as a consultant when I was still working for HP. And presently, of course, I'm working for the Volksbank.
Yeah. So can you explain first maybe the audience what the title of the webinar is about? Because there's a couple of words that are maybe a bit new to our audience. But in short, what are we going to hear about today?
Yes. So most digital organizations, as a challenge, they have a concern that they can't really become adaptable or flexible, and they have concerns or challenges playing into the market conditions or the changing conditions around their organization. So this topic is about sustainable adaptability, which addresses the concern of being able to, of being flexible to changing conditions. Now, any digital strategy, it will be a combination of many measures, and one of the measures, or one of the controls or mechanisms that we use at the Volksbank to transform into a digital organization would be business capability maps.
Mm-hmm. So at the core, it's about making that adaptability sustainable for the long run, not just a one-off shot. And at the core of your solution or approach is business capability maps.
Correct.
that's a quite my experience. If business capabilities is one of those topics, if you let them loose in a discussion forum amongst practitioners, EA experts, yeah, there's some debate and discussion going on. Well, what is your take on that? Why is that? Why is business capability such an important topic that is being discussed?
So I think business capabilities brings together a number of disciplines of business architecture as well as IT architecture. And of course, business and IT architects, if we can still keep the separation for now, we'll change it during the talk. But as long as they're separate, they have a different point of view on the same topic. And also, I mean, business capabilities or capability-based planning, etc. It was invented a long time ago. The subject matter keeps changing, apparently. That means there are many opinions out there. Of course, reason for debate.
Yeah, and there's not one way to implement business capabilities. Of course, it's very much in context and depending on your organization, culture, etc., etc.
Obviously, yes.
Okay, that was a short introduction. We have a slide where you maybe in a bit more detail you can present yourself, who you are, what you've been up to.
Yeah. So Roger Stoffers, enterprise architect for the Volksbank. I've been working with the Volksbank in the Netherlands for about 5 years now. As an IT professional, I've done the job for about 25 years. I started as a developer and then became a technical architect and in the end, enterprise architect. I'm 50 years old. I live in the south of the Netherlands. You can see the red dot over there. And I'm married. I have a son and a daughter. And I studied telematics, which is something fundamentally different than what I practice today. But my interest for development or developing software and then finding out the reasons as to why I was developing software turned me into an architecture profession. And that I'm still doing that very passionately.
Okay. So you already mentioned Proximus. Also, I see government jobs as well. Good. And then there's something else we really would like to share is the fact that you're also a book author.
Yes. I contributed to one book, which is Service-Oriented Architecture, the 2nd edition. And I recently wrote, together with Thomas Earl, the Field Guide to Digital Transformation, a book that happened because of COVID, for me at least, because during the lockdown, I certainly had lots of free time and very little social engagements. So that gave me the opportunity to help co-author this book.
Yeah, cool. Remind us again, it's a field guide. It's not the solution to digital transformation, right? Explain again why you called it a field guide.
Yeah, the answer is never one solution. And the field guide is just a collection of principles and patterns, collection of drivers, collection of best practices, etc., that help identify what is needed in order to do digital transformation. It also addresses some challenges. The book is comprised of 2 sections. One section, the initial part, is for senior management, and the second part is about technology and technology implications. So there is a lot of in it for everyone, I would guess. Depending on your point of view and depending on your needs, you can focus on one or the other part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the thing when I started to read the book, is that at first it said, there's nothing new in here for me. But then it clicked that the first part is really an intended audience. You say senior management or even people in the business, yeah, trying to explain what digital is about. And it's much more than just putting an IT solution to a existing business process.
Or definitely.
Yeah.
The main concerns of why do we need digital transformation and what is it about, that will be addressed without addressing technology concerns. And then we slap the technology part on that.
Yeah. I remember the books from Thomas Earl from when I was in service-oriented architecture. You could fill your wall with the books, and it was a nice thing to see again that it was part of his book series. Yeah. Okay, so to the audience, we're going to start with the main content. If you have questions, put them on the chat. We will try to look into the questions during the talk. Maybe we will keep them to the end of the presentation, but we should try, or maybe afterwards via LinkedIn, try to answer as many questions as possible. But let's start with the main topic of today. So it's about sustainable adaptivity. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
You're welcome.
Sustainable adaptivity at the Volksbank. You already talked about some challenges. Can you go into more detail what the challenges were for Volksbank to do this new approach?
Yes. We are quite an old bank. We're the fourth largest Dutch national bank with a 200 years old history. And that means that we have applications, lots of them. Also, we find ourselves in a situation that we need to make choices on which things we focus and which things can be done by others. So one of the things that will be key to our digital transformation is finding the best partners to help our customers with. So the topic here is ecosystems and sourcing. This is where we cooperate with other organizations to improve our organization or let others help us give better products and services to our customers.
Mm-hmm.
And then because we're so old, there are so many applications and corresponding integrations in our application landscape that we would probably have a challenge making any change. And what happens in a complex landscape very naturally is if you don't want to mess with the stuff that already works. So in case you want to change something, you probably add something new and integrate that into the landscape, immensely complex, in making the subject matter immensely more complex.
And you have to keep on banking, of course.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, and if you want to keep on banking and you want to make sure that these complex integration, the complex application landscape don't get in our way, we need to simplify that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part would be regulatory changes. We've seen in the recent years, about 10 years ago, a number of frequent regulatory changes that started happening with progressively more impact over and over again. So the timelines are short, the impact is big, a complex landscape. That's a recipe for disaster,
Mm-hmm.
of course. We want to make sure that we get ahead of that game. And that's one of the things we need to solve as well. Well, we can't solve the regulatory changes, but how we deal with it is a different story, of course. That's why we're here. And then the last concern that we have is most banks, this is common to most banks, that the organization is geared towards product silos, or where the organization is structured in such a way that it's geared towards having the optimal experience for delivering a specific product. And if you have 5 products, you have 5 times the same experience. It's just independent. Mm-hmm. As a customer, that can be a pain in the behind, because I mean, if I want to deal with an organization that has 5 products, and after I've acquired the first product, I don't like giving all my details again for the second product. And maybe tomorrow I want to have a third product, and then I start all over again. And that's not really customer friendly.
Yeah. Are you big on e-banking? Do you have a mature app for your clients, or how does that work?
We have quite a mature app, and it's still improving, obviously. We keep improving the app all the time, adding new features, etc. And one of the most interesting features is what we call a cost book. And I'm not sure how to translate that at this point in time, but I'm sure we'll solve that afterwards.
It's a ledger or something, no?
Yeah, ledger. Something that customers can use to classify their transactions, to help them classify their transactions and gain insight into what they spend their money on, so they can make smart decisions on how they budget their own income.
Yeah. I get messages each month. You have spent more on restaurants last month than the month before. It's not always a nice thing to hear, but
it's a choice, right?
It's the AI that's doing its job.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there's quite a complex situation to deal with. So you have the complex IT landscape coming from a history of sorts, challenging business ecosystem. There's these rules and regulations that you have to deal with. It's a must. You just have to take care of that. And then you told us you want to break out of those product silos and have probably more a customer-oriented approach. How do you approach that? All those different challenges.
Yeah, there is a number of things that we did, and we've structured this into topics for this presentation. And let's take a look at complexity to start with. And what we have as a starting point is this complex entwined landscape where all the applications or many applications are interconnected. And if you make a change, it looks a bit like this nice plate of spaghetti. And of course it looks nice. The only concern with it is if you try and take one of those strands on your fork, you either get nothing on your fork because it slips back, or you get a lot more than you've bargained for. And if you're in such a situation, that means that the changes that you want to make, they probably account for a lot more work than you anticipate for or expect. So it's about having reliable planning as well, or unreliable planning if you can't really predict how big a set of work should be. So it's like this rock, right? If you want to move that rock, it's a significant effort. Probably you need specialized tools to make that happen. You can't do it alone. You need to partner with many people. It's a lot of cost, effort, lead time, etc., to make those changes, to move the rock. Now, as part of the solution, I think it would be good if we broke that rock into smaller rocks, because smaller rocks are just easier to move around. You can probably have less specialized tooling. You can have multiple groups of people taking on a bit of the change need at a given time. So it means you can have different teams doing multiple changes at the same time where it matters. You can bring focus. You don't need to bring the big rock into play, and that will help with adaptivity at this point in time. And of course, when we want to translate smaller rocks into the business organization, we're not moving rocks, we're actually moving or changing functionality, business processes, etc. So if we look at the second half of the screen here, you could see those rocks as reusable components, just like Lego bricks. And if you stack them in the right way, you have, in this case, our Volksbank.
So we'll see that it's not only bricks, of course. The analogy is it's just not plastic with nuts on that you can start to assemble, but it's really what's inside there that makes the difference,
yes,
of course. But we will talk about that in a short while. Product centricity is now the focus, but you want to change that.
Yes. So when product centricity is a concern and you want to become more customer centric, then if we can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's a product-centric approach. On the right-hand side of the screen, it's a customer-centric approach. And what you see is that the lines of products are not connecting to the customers anymore in the channels at the left-hand side. So where the product silo would deal with the customer directly, on the right-hand side, you see that that's no longer there, this connection, and something popped up in between, which we called integral customer journeys across all channels and all products. What we strive for in the organization is becoming an organization that will be addressing all their business functionality with an omni-channel, multi-brand approach on single platforms. So any functionality that we build it once, and we serve all brands and all channels with that. And hopefully that contributes to becoming customer-centric, and we'll bring some more detail on that shortly.
Yeah, and we will also come back to the difference between omnis, single and multi-channel will also be discussed later on. And then there's the integrations.
Yeah, integrations are always a headache for many organizations. One of the traditional ways of integrating will be point solutions, where one application talks to another solution. And then when the ESB vendors came along, they said, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. It can be much simpler. And you can use our ESB, which is on the right-hand side. I'm not sure where I can quickly show you a pointer here. Yes. So if this would be the ESB, the enterprise service bus, as a connectivity layer for all the enterprise applications, then all the applications that need functionality from those applications, they just call the ESB and it will manage the traffic for you. So this is an important step, and a step that really works. The only concern with the step is that with this natural transition into a centralized ESB comes the territory of centralizing business functionality into the ESB, which means that you now have floating business functionality between business applications, often with no single responsible person for that functionality. And that's a concern, because if ownership is unclear, it's unclear whom to address for any changes. So it's ultimately harder to make changes. Also, if nobody is responsible, then the knowledge can leave the company. And if the knowledge leaves the company, that complicates matters even more. So if you take a look at, let me see if that works. Yes. If you take a look at having on the left-hand side that ESB with some smarts or business logic in the center floating between applications, you probably want to solve that. And what we said is, well, what we want is a very thin and shallow integration layer. It should be there for transport and connectivity. It should not be there for business functionality. So on the left-hand side, you see the pink-shaped smarts. That on the right-hand side, we've moved to the consuming applications and the offering applications, the applications that really offer business functionality. And what you see is that there is no longer business functionality floating in between. And now we can say that there are clear owners either at consuming side or at providing side.
Yeah, so it's no longer a lasagna that you had before.
Hopefully we're moving from spaghetti into lasagna area, but moving into lasagna requires some additional steps. So
okay, we'll stop the pasta talk. That's for later on.
Sure.
So those were the ideas, getting out of the product silos, complexity, integrations that you have to deal with. How can you approach that? So you choose not to address these problems one by one. You didn't talk to the business and let them do their work, talk to IT and let them do their work. You really introduced the concept of reusable business components as a strategic means to tackle all those. Can you talk us through the concept of components, business components?
Yeah, sure. So we recognize that we needed business and IT to work together solidly. And in order to do that, they should be really sitting together if we can. We'll deal with that shortly. But you need a mechanism, a construct that allows you to do that logically in your business application landscape, but maybe also physically with the people, the staff that you use to deliver those reusable business components. The business capability map is something that we introduce as a map to manage those business components in function of the digital strategy. I mean, becoming a digital organization is just a means to an end, right? You have certain mission and vision and then corporate goals that you establish. And after that, you figure out, okay, in order to address this, we need digital transformation. And our approach was we need business capabilities to manage this digital transformation. So those business capabilities are the reusable business components that we discussed earlier. So we've got customer order capturing there as an example, Lego brick, which you will see again later on, I guess. And a business capability, I'm sure that there are other definitions and I'm sure there's reason for debate, but a pragmatic description of a business capability could be that it will be an ability of an organization with a clear purpose that provides value and helps achieving the strategic goals of that organization. So if you could establish a set of business capabilities geared towards fulfilling the strategy of that organization, so really mimicking what is needed for that strategy, then it could actually become a very effective and business-aligned business transformation, digital transformation. Now, business capabilities themselves as reusable components, they are not your organization. I mean, they're needed to make up your organization, but you need them to work together very solidly or at least smartly. And just to compare, if I have a car and I take all its parts and I put them on the road, it's no longer a car. It's not a system that can get you anywhere. It's the same with business capabilities. Just having business capabilities is not your organization. It's not an effective organization. You need another construct to align them and make them work together. And that's where we use the business capability map. The business capability map is an aligned set of business capabilities collectively required for realizing and supporting the strategy of the organization in order to achieve its goals. Again, a pragmatic description, but I hope it sort of describes that there is a system in place now and a coherent view of making those business applications work together. So if those applications on the business capability map are a coherent system, that is what we should be using or structuring smartly in order to provide the organization's goals.
At this level, and I think whatever the definition for business capability, there's always the fact we're talking about what is being done or what is needed to realize the strategy. So it's maybe a big distinction with processes, which we will talk about later. This is the what. Processes, IT is how we will do that.
Correct.
And another thing about the business capability map, my understanding is also that it tends to be pretty stable over time if all goes well, right?
Yes. So if the business capabilities describe what we need to do to fulfill our strategy, then unless the strategy changes, the business capability map itself doesn't really change, because you already established what you need to do, and what you need to do hardly changes. How you do it is a different story. You might optimize business capabilities, you might source them from external, etc. So you can still make smart choices, but the map itself remains fairly stable.
But I think it does help that the map somehow depicts the strategy. There's always a narrative. You won't have enough with reading the blocks or reading the map. There's always the narrative, but I think it helps in how you depict it, that it somehow tells also or supports the strategic story as well, instead of making it just a map with boxes within boxes. And I see that also in your depiction.
No, indeed. When we started using the business capability mapping as an approach, or as part of our approach, we said we need the map structure to tell a certain story. And that's what we'll deal with next.
Okay, good. We have this structure.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's where we can also make the distinction between the various types of channels also, which more or less tell a story, how you go from single to omni-channel.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the main concerns that we have is moving from product silos, not really channel unaware, or not really channel agnostic, into channel agnostic single business functionalities across all the products. And what that introduces is a discussion on single, on multi, and omni-channel. So let's start with single channel. Single channel approach is where if you want to obtain a product or service, that you can go to a particular single channel and you can deal with it there. And I mean, many years ago, you would go to a bank branch in order to establish your bank account. And that was the only channel you could deal with them. You either go there or you have no contact at all. Yeah, occasionally you get a letter, but you couldn't really establish a bank account using a letter. You needed to go in person. And then later on, other channels were added. For example, the mobile app and internet banking and all that kind of stuff. So other channels were added, and that gives us a multi-channel approach. And a multi-channel approach is different from a single channel approach in the sense that you can have multiple ways, multiple channels to get your bank account or mortgage or whatever as a bank. And then the concern that arises when you do that is that if I go into one channel and I'm dealt with there, I go to another channel, for example, I start online and then I go to the bank branch physically, that they don't know who you are, they don't know what you were doing, they have no clue how to help you. So they start over, and that's quite annoying. So the omni-channel approach is an approach where whatever channel we have, the functionality that we offer, it's seamlessly offered through a number of channels. Not necessarily all of them, because some channels in some situations don't make any sense. And those channels allow us to talk to customer information, product information, all kinds of information, all kinds of products and services, without worrying about where I am from a channel perspective as a customer. And the big pro of an omni-channel approach is that the customer journeys that happen there, they are seamless across all the channels. So you don't need to start over. I could start online and then call them and say, hey, listen, I've got a problem. Can you help me out? I can see what the problem is. Let me help you out there. Or I go to the physical branch and they know exactly what I did yesterday or this afternoon, and they can help me forward getting my products and services in place or my problem solved, etc. So it doesn't really matter anymore where you start or which channels you use. It's seamless. And it allows the customer to perceive an organization from the best channel they see fit for, rather than being forced into a single channel silo.
Yeah, so you can start as a customer your journey on your couch on an iPad, and then move on to the bank, or maybe an online talk with the teller. Yeah, I know most people think that they know about omnichannel, and they probably, and I hope so, have experience with their own bank where that works, that journey over channels. But the devil is often also in the details. How often do you do, if you have to call your mobile provider help desk, one of the first things you have to do, you press 1 for English, and then enter your mobile number so that we can identify you. And then you wait, and then they still ask you, who are you? What is your phone number? Oh, but we don't get that information. So it can be, you can set up something really, really great, but it's really in the details. So it's not only an IT challenge, it's really organizing and making sure that knowing within the organization who is involved in that customer journey. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and that's what you're trying to solve here. Not just by adding IT to it, because that won't get it, of course. So you have to get away with complexity. Remove that complexity from the landscape. And in the talk before, I know that it was coming, of course. Taming that complexity at Volksbank is by applying those principles of normalized systems. And that's maybe maybe the IT audience might have a hunch what it's about, but maybe not everyone has knowledge about those principles. Maybe you can talk about this for a while.
Yes. So the visualization that we've used here is a very deep hole. And we want to move away from deep holes of IT and move into shallow waters of simple IT. So in order to keep an application landscape modular, adaptable, resilient, what we do is we apply the principles of normalized systems. And we do that using those business capabilities. So you could say a module from normalized systems point of view is a business capability, which is a lot bigger than in the original theory by Jan van Elst and Hedwig Mannert. And we make sure that we try and stick and adhere to those principles as close as possible. And we'll deal with them very briefly. Separation of concerns is the first one. Separation of concerns, again, reason for a lot of debate, but let's keep it simple for today and say that let's functionality stick together, things that change together, put them together in the same block of functionality. If they're different or considered another one's problem, then really make sure that they're not your problem anymore. By the way, normalized systems is about reducing the number of change drivers. Mm-hmm. So if I had a piece of business functionality that would cater for other people's concerns, that means that if they need changes, I need to make changes. And that's something we want to prevent. So I'm responsible for my business functionality, and I'm the one who determines which change drivers are relevant here and in my scope or not in my scope. The second bit is data version transparency. So if I have business functionality exposed in my business application landscape, and I offer that to others, I exchange information, I communicate. And when we communicate, we need to make sure that we understand the data that is being communicated, that we understand which data is being passed. Data version transparency is a very simple principle, but it has severe consequences, is that when a business application or a business functionality should be able to take in different versions of data and not complain about, hey, that's the wrong version, I can't deal with you right now, or I can't help you. It should be really transparent. It should be really taking in any information that it can get and deal with the customer as good as possible. Mm-hmm. And that also leads to the discussion on principle number 3, which is action version transparency. And action version transparency is if I talk to somebody, especially with business services, if I talk to a business services and they evolve over time, I can get different versions over time. And what I don't want is a different version for every consumer, because that gives me point solutions again. So trying and staying away from point solutions means that if I evolve the landscape, I don't change the way I interact with the people around me, with the consumers of the business functionality. So I offer a service, and if I change the data, I don't change the operation that uses that data. I know it's a bit of IT stuff that I explained there, but it's important that it conveys the message of transparent communication, both principles.
Mhm.
And then the last one, separation of states, that's the biggie, that's the complex one, or the most complex one. It's a very specific kind of separation of concerns. And in order to explain that, I think we should use an example. So I've prepared a little example here, and this is the deep waters that we saw in the initial illustration. Deep nesting in systems leads to brittle systems. What that means is it's a very, very pragmatic approach to looking at your landscape. If you have deep chains of messages, deep chains of message exchanges, coordination problems happen. Example, down there, you see the red billing order. If there is an issue there, that issue can't be solved by the billing order. Who can solve that problem then? Well, the billing order can decide, okay, I throw an error message. Help me out, I can't solve this. Now, the service order, the component above it, will have the same problem. Well, I mean, billing, that is your concern, not my concern, so I will not deal with it. You know what? I'll throw the error message upwards until in the end, it's the consumer who gets an error message on the screen. And if there are many components and deep nesting, there are many reasons why such a message may appear on the customer screen. So that's a brittle system. It's not very resilient. And the more complex your system application landscape is, the bigger this problem becomes.
But by the way, this may sound, and of course, those are principles applied to your IT systems, but they also apply just the same to your business and how you interact with each other, and where one state ends, and so it's those principles are also needed to see how your organization works to make that adaptability. Just stay tuned if you think this is only for IT. This is also these principles are also important for how you organize those capabilities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And although I've depicted services here, you could also have business capabilities there, which are larger units of functionality, business functionality, reusable business components that talk to each other. And then you still have the same problem. Who can resolve it here? Who can resolve problems? Coordination state is distributed. It can't be one, it can't be them all, so you're helpless. So if you would apply separation of states, that will be the next slide, then the same set of components is still there. It's just that they're structured differently. What you can see is it's no longer a deep nesting of delegated functionality. It's now one responsible for the coordination, which will be the commercial order over there. And there's one, or all the others are responsible for just doing their own business. So I can have customer management and preference management and a catalog management, etc. All kinds of business functionality that can run independently. Now, if I want to make a change, somebody orders something and I need to address changes across all those components down there, the commercial order will be responsible for that. Now, if a problem occurs with this approach, then whatever happens, the commercial order is the point in this architecture here, the point in the architecture that allows us to deal with the issue. Regardless of where something happens, it has control over all the changes. So it also has control over mitigations in case of issues. Single point of control, single point of responsibility, and that's what separation of states can give you.
Yeah, you get a less brittle system, but system, people, process, IT, data, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I think problems can be solved more easily and detected, because that's also a problem. Where is a problem occurring? Is there a problem? And who do we need to talk to, or what do we need to talk to?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, some of the effects that you get with working with this separation of states from my point of view.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. People, process, IT. So you already said it a few times. It's business services. Those capabilities at one point start to provide services to the customer, but also to the rest of the organization to have this be able to be orchestrated or orchestrate other capabilities. How do these business capabilities come to life then to provide those services?
Yes, an interesting and a challenging job, by the way, because business capabilities is a logical construct, right? And if they want to be effective, you need to materialize that in the real world. if it's an ability, it's also about people and technology and all that kind of stuff. And in this view, which is on the screen right now, you can see that the business capability, I mean, there are many ways at which you can view or review a business capability, but there are a number of important facets or segments that I'd like to discuss here. So of course, a business capability should have a purpose and it should provide value. You can't see that here. But in order to do that, there is functionality and processes in place there, things that allow you to operate the business capability. Business capability is about providing processes so customers get value. Customers get a business account or something like that. Sorry, a bank account or something like that as a product or service. And in order to operate business processes, you probably need people, because the people, they execute the business processes, sometimes aided with automation, which is where technology and automation comes into view. And then if a business process is executed or a set of business processes, then it's also responsible for a set of information. For example, if we have the business capability customer management as depicted here, then probably the processes that are dealing with managing customers and the information that is controlled or owned by this business capability is probably customer information. So we have a sort of domain-driven design approach here, and I'm not the expert, I'll admit to that, definitely, but the approach that we have is you have a business capability which is sort of a domain, or it is demarcated by a domain that comprises people, processes, automation, and information as a single coherent unit. So, and it's on the bottom there. A business capability could be summarized as a coherent set of business processes managed by people responsible for a certain set of key or master information aided with automation.
So people who have been thinking, I don't see the difference between a capability and a process, because customer management, yeah, we have a process called customer management.
Yes.
It's these various perspectives, function, people, technology, and information together, and maybe more than one process to serve that one capability.
Yes.
So to be clear, also, you here see a depiction of one of the blocks, just one of the blocks on on the map. That's
Yes.
Yeah. So, and these have to be orchestrated. So that means that we're giving processes, maybe in some organizations, another role, or putting them maybe higher up or maybe lower in how process management is being done. I know a lot of companies, processes are the thing that makes the business run, but here we put some layer on top of it. And processes mean people. You have process owners. What happens with those? Big question. Maybe they become team leads, but they still have the KPIs. There's the data part. This obviously, and we will talk about this later on, a data-driven mindset, but that's something most companies continuously have to work on. You're never ready with a data-driven approach. So the impact on organization is quite large, I think, introducing business capabilities.
Yes, it's foundational to the organization. And I have to say up front, from a theoretical point of view, you would probably structure the organization to support the business capabilities as solidly as possible.
I agree.
Theoretically, in practice, the organization probably already has a structure, and it can be quite cumbersome to introduce business capability mapping for the simple reason that you sort of start rowing upstream. You try to introduce a new construct, and you are telling people, yeah, but you're poorly organized. You should do things differently from an organizational structure point of view. And that's not really a message people want to hear. So you can get all kinds of cultural and historical challenges with the people that are already there, that have established the current organization. So if such a business capability should be supported solidly, so let's take the theoretical approach here. Then we need a multidisciplinary team that supports this business capability. People who can manage the process, execute the process, people who can manage change, etc. So all kinds of, and automation, all kinds of different roles in your team or in your teams that support or execute this business capability. So let's assume that we're doing DevOps here because it fits very nicely with this approach. I could assign ownership of such a business capability, in this case, customer management, to a specific team or group of teams if it's too small to manage with, or too big to manage with one team. And the idea is that the team will be responsible for operating, so executing, but also maintaining, changing, and developing strategically. They are responsible for everything. So it's not that they can point to some enterprise architect and saying, you tell me what to do. No, we already tell you the outlines from enterprise architecture point of view. You know our mission, our vision, our strategy. How can you best serve our organization from your team's point of view? And that's your own strategic development and your own responsibility. And the teams that want to do that, as we said, they're multidisciplinary. So here's where we introduce the A team. The A team was...
we're 50, right? We understand
50. We
this.
know
We wrote the reference, yeah.
Yes. And we're not ashamed that we know who the A team is. But anyway, so the A team is a multidisciplinary team operating and executing and planning a business capability. And in the Volksbank, our A teams, they are materialized in this way, that we have operational business processes. They're executed by what we call service teams, and those service teams, they interact with customers. They are in the stores, they're on the phone, they're, depending on the channels, of course, they are who actually execute the business processes and have customer contact. And then obviously we still need to manage change and technology and automation. And I think it's clear that those are not the same people in a team. So we have different roles in that A team that allow to manage and make the strategic changes that are needed in the automation as well. And then obviously you need a captain, if you will. So we have product owners that are there in between the service teams and the change teams. And they are responsible for strategic planning and strategic execution of change. They set the priorities, but they are there in between the service teams and the change teams.
And I imagine some of the roles are outsourced in some occasions.
It could be,
yeah.
Could be, yeah. But the main thing is that wherever they are sourced, these people, they have a single responsibility as sort of a virtual team.
Yep, cool.
Oh, there was one more thing we need to discuss still, right? It's ownership for business processes, because that changed when we said we were stopping with product-centric views. So when we had the product-centric approach, business processes end-to-end for a specific product were in control of the product silo, the product line. And we said, no, we want to stop that. We want to have a customer experience that is optimal. We want to deal with customers primarily. They should have the best ever experience they could wish for. Stop thinking in products and start thinking in customer experience. And once you do that, you need to decouple the product silos from the customers. And that's where we introduce the centralized business processes for customer interaction. And that will be a new component. Let me see, it's this one. A new component that will manage the customer interaction to the product change, customer change silos. Yeah,
it's a bit of a hub.
It acts as a hub, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And the last bit here that we should discuss is that you see that there is a new business capability established over there. So we have the capabilities offering products and services to customers, or offering products and services, but making that go into customers seamlessly. That is what happens here in these centralized customer interaction processes.
Yeah. Good. We really talked business here. We talked organization with the team, the A team, the processes that they are executed. At one point, we do have to go into the digital sphere.
Yeah.
Those services need to become executable by other capabilities, by other software.
Yes.
So the component, the business components, there is also something living more or less in the digital sphere.
I guess so, yes, because any business functionality, any process that you execute, sometimes it needs to talk to other parts of the organization, and that's where we interface. Sometimes with people and I know letters and the emails and stuff like that, or calls, but sometimes it's digitally communicated with interfaces, digital interfaces. And what we want to make sure is that across the landscape, which can have heterogeneous functionality, we want to have a uniform approach for integration. A uniform approach because once we standardize, we don't need to reinvent the wheel as often because we already know what an interface is. We also make sure that those interfaces are interoperable, which means that regardless of the functionality or the technology that we build them with, we can talk to them and we can choose other technologies if we see better fit for those. So it's very important that if we want to make business functions or business capabilities reusable, we make sure that they have interoperable standardized interfaces.
Mm-hmm. To be able to reuse and to compose them then.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And the idea is then that any interface that we offer, it's indeed reusable. And if somebody needs to talk to a certain business capability, they can use the standardized interfaces.
Mm-hmm. So we can depict that with more or less the same image that we had with your separation of states. We can have a similar, I think on the next slide, similar depiction of those different components being orchestrated through those interfaces.
Yes, and key is that if they are standardized, I mean, those Lego bricks, they have a standardized interface as well. And if they don't have a standard interface, you can't make them stick together, work together. So in that next set or in that next animation here, what we show is a set of business capabilities, all with their standardized interfaces, the little dots over there at the top. Other capabilities that probably need to manage some of that information down there. So if I want to capture customer orders, I probably interact with customer and customer account manager, etc. And then if I have decided that I will order whatever I put in my shopping basket, I will talk to order fulfillment and make sure that order fulfillment makes that happen, makes the change across the entire landscape for customer data, for product data, etc. So activating a bank account, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's good if we take a look and revert back to that picture that we did earlier, where we said we want to have flat integrations and not deep integrations, not deep message chains. And we do the same with the business capability map. We have business components for which we have central state coordinators, separation of states, that will manage the underlying regular business capabilities. And regular, what I mean is autonomous. They can run independently. Once I've managed my customer data, it's running independently. Once I've enabled a bank account, it's operating independently, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A question caught my eye. Sorry that we weren't able to really follow the chat on the spot. There's a question about dependencies between teams. I think it came when you said, okay, each capability has its own team, but of course there are dependencies between teams with the other capabilities, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if we use the business capability as a strategic approach, it also means that the strategic priorities go into the capability map as a construct as well, or as a means. So that means we know exactly what the top priorities are and on which capabilities those have effect. And then we can have the teams who own the capabilities share the responsibility of shaping that strategy.
Yeah. Okay. We have some 10 minutes to go. A little bit less. We will conclude now with the other dimension, one dimension that we haven't touched, and it's the data dimension. One of the parts of the solution of your approach is real-time analytics. In terms of I can imagine making that integration between business components as automatic as possible. But that's something you will to conclude this webinar, take us through the story of how you go from data savviness in support of real-time analytics.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the big challenges that we had as an old organization is that we came from a lot of traditional types of integration, a lot of point-to-point, a lot of periodic integrations and information exchange. And information that we need for decision today will probably only be available tomorrow or the day after, which is not really workable as a solution. So instead of having this periodic, slow, and multiple versions of this the truth approach, we wanted to make sure that we go to more real-time approach where information seamlessly streams throughout the organization and becomes pervasively available. And the way of doing that is, first of all, by making reusable integrations rather than point solutions, and then making smart choices as to which types of technical integrations you use. We use APIs and events or streaming data for that. And the idea is that once we've done that, you can always address the latest state, the latest truth in an organization by calling an API or by looking at the events that are shared by a business capability. If we look further, those standardized near real-time integrations, they are key to having this near real-time landscape or application landscape, where at the bottom here you can see the various capabilities offering APIs and events. On the left-hand side with the little circles, those are the APIs, and with the arrows, they are the events. And the idea is that if any application needs information from any of these business capabilities, they just ask for it by calling an API. Or if I wanted to proactively share that information, I could use the right-hand side and share that information to anybody who would be interested in event streams. And an event stream is nothing more than a continuous stream of data that anybody can subscribe to who's interested. So I publish it once, and then they can have all the other interested parties in the organization consume that information.
And that's where version data also comes along, of course, because they come with a timestamp and a version, etc., etc.
Yes.
Yeah. The more information, the better, of course. Yeah. And finally,
so if we want to use this for real-time analytics, it's key that information flows freely and is not dealt with periodically. I'm not saying that information cannot be streaming periodically. Traditional integrations, historical integrations, they are there. We're just not dogmatically replacing them. We're replacing the ones that make sense to replace. What we said is the standardized way from now on is APIs and events. So please try and refrain from file-based or database integrations. Use APIs and events because that gives us a more real-time or near real-time access to data. And then the second is only if you need new analytics on existing slow data, then replace the data exchange and make sure it becomes faster. And the idea is that those business capabilities on the left-hand side, if this is the operational business on the left-hand side, and we have a data and analytics platform on the right-hand side, that those capabilities, they offer standardized interfaces, as we discussed earlier, APIs or events, we'll deal with the buckets later, and they can be used to provide information to the data analytics landscape, which will be a set of products and suites and tools to manage data and to do analysis. So the idea is that the data is delivered in a standardized form, at least in our governance, and then we can use that data to build integrated views on that data, which we can then use for analysis. And the idea is that all that information, you can see the purple arrows here, it flows freely throughout the landscape. Any information that becomes available, you pass it along in an event stream, not dogmatically, of course. And once we've done that, we can analyze and report and gain new insights of what happened in the primary application landscape. And if we use event streams, that can be a fairly fast, few seconds only process. So once that information is there and we find those new insights, we can then use them in the primary application landscape, in the operational application landscape. And the way to do that, I'll get to the buckets later, is very simple. We feed back an event stream to the relevant places in the organization. So we republish the new insights and we can use those in the operational systems. And I have an example for that lately. And what we're also doing right now is if we want to have standardized deliveries of data buckets in the data analytics plane, if you will, then why not provide buckets as an interface rather than going into event streams and then to buckets with all the delay in the process. So
that's the raw data, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ideally you probably standardize the buckets as well. And that will take some time, but it's still faster than putting it on the wire, transforming it, putting it into a bucket, transforming it, etc. So this is how you would theoretically approach such a real-time streaming system with real-time analytics. And I think it would be good to have a use case as well. And the use case would be very simple. We want to provide next best actions to our customers. Customers will be on the left-hand side of the picture over here somewhere, and they deal with any channels. There are the channels, and those channels are, well, the customer chooses the channels that he likes. And the idea is that there is lots of functionality in our system or in our business application landscape here: customer management, insights, transactional insights, the ones that you use in your app when it says, oh, you spend a bit too much money on food this month. That information, it's shared throughout the organization with event streams. So you see the dotted arrows again. We have our product backbone, where we have capabilities that manage our products and services. And we have our customer interaction management here, where we capture all the information that a customer has from an interaction point of view. So did I do something in an app or a web? Did I send an email? Did I call? Whatever. It's recorded in the customer interaction management. So this is sort of the context for allowing next best activities or next best actions to be defined. Because I need some basic information to work with, right? Now, in order to make those decisions, decide which are the next best actions, we need to make sure that that system or that suite of systems obtains its information ready-made. So we need analytics in place. So the idea is that the whole landscape, it feeds the analytics plane, the data platform here in this picture, with event streams. And we have that three-stage approach, theoretically here: ingress, analytics, and egress, in our data and analytics platform. And we use that to aggregate and make decisions and figure out what's the next best action. We take all that information in, we analyze it, and the result will be left fed back to the next best activity management or action management system. And then, only then, we've got everything ready to deal with the customer. So the customer in this picture, the customer has done stuff, but not maybe necessarily interacted at this point in time. And when I now start interacting as a customer, next best actions are in place. And anytime I make a new interaction, I make a call, etc., which could be the actual placing of an order that I'm doing on the web right now, more and more information is fed to the system, more decisions are made, and more best or more tailored activities or actions are defined. And once that's in place, we can do the customer journey. So let's dim out everything that is no longer relevant for the actual customer journey. Customer comes in, customer wants to address, wants to deal with us in, I don't know, maybe they want to change their address or whatever. And then the next best action management has an interface available for our order management or order capture system. So the order capture system, it will occasionally or periodically query the next best action system in convenient times. What would be the next best step to offer to the customer? So whatever interaction the customer has on the left-hand side, at some point in time or frequently, the order management capture system can also ask, what should I do next? What should I offer this customer? And in this approach, we can offer a better experience.
So while we're talking automation, there's also, we have to remember there are also people involved. It could be that a person is called at the desk to intervene manually, for instance. That's
Sure.
That's the idea of encapsulating people, process, data, and logic, IT logic in those capabilities. So we're at the end. We didn't have sadly a lot of time for the questions. I guess, Roger, we can look at them afterwards and maybe put something on LinkedIn. That may be interesting also for a larger audience, that we can share with a recording of this webinar and maybe the slides. Maybe as a closure, we have a closing slide as we should. There we go. I would like to thank everyone for joining us. Roger, especially thank you again for being here on campus.
Pleasure.
In Brussels. Thank you for you two for the support, and everyone, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn to get more information on the center or our next webinars and events. Thank you very much.
Thank you.